introducing our moderator for today's event, Craig Tim.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am one of the 3 Craigs that are on the Art of Wisconsin. So if you yell something about Craig, I may not pay any attention, but that's okay. Before we get started, to honor all of our veterans, both serving now and our retired veterans and our folks in America, if you could stand and let's join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And if you are a veteran, either currently serving or a retiree, we all thank you very much for your service. If you've never been here before, we welcome you. If you have been here before, we welcome you. Try to have these both in the spring and also in the fall. We always put the weather on the Mid-State Tech team, so thank you. It's pretty gorgeous out there. What we're going to do today is we have these folks up here. They get to sit at the big tall table there. We're going to start with our elected officials and have them give us an update, introduce themselves. You probably all know them, but just kind of things they're working on in Madison and other places. Have some questions, and there will be an opportunity for you to also ask questions. Around 8:30-ish, we're going to recognize other elected officials in the area. And again, thank you for your service, no matter what that capacity. And then for the last probably 20 minutes or so, it'll be just an open discussion to ask any elected official kind of an update or things that are going on in your particular world. We want to be very informal. This is just the discussion. Again, we just appreciate having this opportunity. So I'm going to start in the 69th Assembly District.
Oh, you are, huh? I thought we'd start with the Senate. Don't you want to start with the Senator?
I could also say ladies first. That's polite. But Donna Rohrer representing. We're glad to have you. As I mentioned, we extended it out to all of Wood County, so she's in the 69th. So please introduce yourself and maybe a few items that you're working on right now.
I will do so. Thank you very much. So good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here today. I live in Marshfield. I'm also a Wood County Board Supervisor, so I'm so happy to see my colleagues from the county board here. I'm in my 2nd term. If you recall, Bob Culp was my predecessor. He has now moved out of my district to Lincoln County in his little whatever compound up there that he's doing. But anyway, he's enjoying retirement. So when he retired, he called me and asked me if I would be interested in running. And I have to be honest with you, I hadn't thought about it for a very long time. And so I did and had a primary, and we came through the primary and then won the general election. And so now I'm in my 2nd term. The committees that I am on, and I think Scott will talk about some of our campaign things. Scott is the chair of our Assembly Campaigns and Elections Committee. And we are working really hard to do some good things to clean up election laws, to try to prevent some of the things that happened in 2020. Scott's leadership has been just extraordinary with bipartisan bills, and I think we're doing a really good job in our committee to try to clean up a couple of things. The clerks came and talked to us, and we took their suggestions about what were some of the things that we could help them with legislatively. I'm also on the Education Committee. I think the biggest thing that we did is the reading literacy thing. If you all have seen the reading and math scores, they are abysmal. And an illiterate society is not an option. And so I felt very, very strongly about supporting the $50 million that we put in to the K-12 program to try to prepare kids better. I have a granddaughter, happens to live in Oklahoma City, that I'm paying for some tutoring for now. She was in the 3rd grade. They wouldn't keep her in the 3rd grade because she was one of the larger girls. So they moved her to the 4th grade, but she only reads at a 1st grade level. How does that happen, that you move these kids on when they do not meet expectations? So that's just a personal story in another state about how we're all struggling with literacy. And the science of reading has gotten a lot of attention, which is phonetically based. And so I have to tell you a real quick story. We homeschooled our children until my husband got so ill and died that year. And I taught my kids how to read phonetically. And we went to the playground one day for our recess, and my 6-year-old son said to me, "Mom, what does sh mean?" And somebody had written that under the sliding board, and he read it phonetically, and so we had to talk about that word. But that was kind of funny, and I thought, well, he got it, didn't he get it? So that was good. So the reading literacy, I feel very, very strongly about. We've just got to close the gap, especially with minorities. We've just got to address that, or we're just going to have an illiterate society, which is not going to serve us very well. I'm a nurse by profession. A lot of you all may know that I worked as a nurse on the cardiac floor. I started when it was St. Joseph's Hospital, ended in December 2020, about 6 days before I got inaugurated into the State Assembly. Loved cardiac nursing. If anybody ever wants me to talk to their kids about going into nursing, you just call me, because nursing was a profession that served me very well. I also taught for UW-Eau Claire College of Nursing for a number of years at the Marshfield site. So I went into the legislature with some real passion for some health issues, especially dental care. I feel so strongly about increasing reimbursement for Medicaid patients. We had a patient when I was a nurse working full-time before I went to teach, who pulled his rotten teeth out with a vice pliers from his salvage yard up in northern Wisconsin. And he came in with a horrible endocarditis, which is an inflammation of one of the layers of the heart. And after about 6 or 7 weeks of IV antibiotics, Dr. Pearson took him to the OR to try to fix his heart, and it was so damaged that he died. In his 40s, left a child, a business. It was just, I had him as a patient the day before, and I remember he looked at me and he said, "Donna, is there anybody that can help me with a will?" Because he did not have a good thing. So I feel very strongly about access, affordability, trying to help people, because an ounce of prevention in that area is worth a pound of cure. And people are going to the operating room with toothaches and all kinds of issues, and if we can increase some reimbursement, especially in that population, with Medicaid, it would really, I think, save us money in the long run. A bill I'm going to talk about, but I don't know if you all know, sometimes the politics down there just drives me nuts. But I authored with Senator Ballwig a bill to extend postpartum care to ladies, obviously. Well, I don't know anymore, but anyway. So we wanted to extend postpartum coverage to 365 days. The Senate passed it like 32-1, and I'm so proud of them. I'm having a little bit of problems getting it through the Assembly because it's seen as a Medicaid expansion bill. And we have a lot of feeling in our neck of the woods that nobody wants to extend Medicaid expansion. So we've been working on that, tremendous support for that bill, but things get kind of hung up sometimes because of philosophies that are down there. And we work on some controversial things, and I don't want to really go into some of those details because they're pretty dicey. But if anybody wants to know about them, we'll be glad to tell you about them. That week before last was a real circus at the Capitol. So they're kind of the major things. I'm also on workforce development, economic development. I feel very strongly about that. We're not quite as active in those committees as we are in some of the other committees that I'm on, but I have thoroughly enjoyed representing the people. One of the favorite things that I like to do is help people navigate the bureaucracy of government. People call our office just frustrated because nobody's answering the phone, and I have wonderful staff, and they care deeply about the constituents in the 69th Assembly District, so we work really hard to help them, and so I'm pleased to be here, and thank you for coming.
How do you follow that?
Thank you. Thank you very much. You almost had your two colleagues falling off their chairs laughing there, so just so you know.
That's good.
Let's move to the 72nd. Scott Krug.
Good morning. For all of you that don't know me, I don't know how, unfortunately, I've been all over the place lately. So I am Scott Krug, State Representative for the 72nd. That's Southern Wood County, Northern Adams County, Western Waushara. Well, almost, it's getting to be more and more Waushara as the map changes. And I've got one township left in Portage County. We'll see how long that lasts. This is my 7th term currently. Just to give you a little flavor of how the legislature turns over in Wisconsin versus DC, me being in my 7th term means I'm the 4th highest ranking in seniority in the state assembly. You compare that to Washington, D.C., I would be brand new, right? I'd be a baby yet. So I think there's something to be said for how that turnover is impacting politics in Madison, getting fresh voices and faces in as quick as we've been over the last decade's been nice. I mean, there are days where I turn around and look in the caucus and wonder who the hell these people are, but that's okay, you get used to it. As Donna mentioned, I did take on a new responsibility this session. I took on the chairmanship of the Campaigns and Elections Committee. It is not my background, not my expertise, but I am an expert on being a good person. And I think that's what our committee has strived to do and spread across the State House is the ability to have conversations, the ability to talk about tough issues, and actually, don't repeat this, but compromise, right? To find a tough issue and find a middle ground. I'm in sales, I do real estate, I've been doing it for 10 years. I know how to find what one person has, what the other person wants, figure out a way to merge those, and I think taking that skill set to campaigns and elections, especially in Wisconsin in 2024, is a great asset to our state, and I appreciate Donna for being such a willing partner to take on a bigger role in the committee on, as we hear testimony, we're literally writing bills, we're listening to what our clerks are saying. We just heard one of Donna's bills yesterday that basically was the same thing. Clerks came, testified on something else, it came up in committee that they wanted to hear, they wanted to learn more about it, wanted us to do something about it. So we picked a Republican, we picked a Democrat, write a bill, we heard the bill yesterday, it's moving forward. It should not be that complicated in Madison to get something done that we agree on. I think 85% of the stuff that we do, even the bills that get vetoed, there might be one or two things in a bill that the governor may not like that gets a bill vetoed entirely. So my goal this session in the next few weeks is to pick through those things and find where we do agree. Leave the rest on the wayside. I mean, it's good governance. I think it's just the way that we have to approach governance in Wisconsin in split government days. And I think we should try to adapt that even when one side has all the control too, because like I mentioned to somebody who testified yesterday that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle are great people, they have great ideas, they are great at helping figure out how we can split the brain power and the workload. We shouldn't just pigeonhole somebody just because they're an R or a D. So I'm hoping that message spreads a little bit quicker in the Capitol, and I think it has this session. If you look at the things we've accomplished, you may still hear in the news how the leadership and the governor are arguing. It's more rare than it was before. We're getting big things accomplished. We're getting the state budgets signed relatively quickly without a lot of vetoes. Got a gigantic change in our shared revenue program that was generational. Got signed into law rather quickly because of negotiations. I think we're getting there on the Brewer Stadium too. I never thought that campaigns and elections would be the least controversial thing I talk about. But there are other things that have brewed up that have been agreed on, that'll get signed into law, so that iciness, it's thawing. And I think that's because of some of the conversations we're able to have in campaigns and elections to give a little bit of empowerment to the minority party, to let them have some skin in the game, let them know that we're listening, and that the minority isn't just a voice, that they're an active participant. So it's a little controversial in some circles that I run in to say these types of things, but I think it's what people in my district expect out of me. I grew up, Tommy Thompson's my governor. He represented some of the areas that I represent now. He never had legislative majorities when he was governor, yet he seemed to get everything done that he wanted to get done. So that's the model, right? That's the way to approach it. So I kind of take that on. Besides that, I'm also a 7-term member on the Colleges and Universities Committee, and I take a lot of pride in that, and I think it's something that I will always stay on because I'm, alumnus of MSTC, UWSP, both systems, so I've got a unique perspective on how we can help keep merging those systems and make that transfer for students from one to the other seamless, and I think we've done an amazing job with that the last 8 years. I look forward to doing a lot more in those areas too. I'm the only legislator that lives in Adams County, so shout out to my Adams County friends, Lori Giamatti from Town of Rome, Megan from the Adams County Chamber. It is another great perspective that I get to be the only legislator who lives in Adams County, because we've got some issues that are unique in Adams County, right?
You're a county board supervisor.
And I'm a county board supervisor, right? And I'm also on my Lakes District, because when you take those things that are important to people back home, get involved in them and help understand them at a 5,000-foot level, it's easier to take it to the state level at a 60,000-foot level and say, okay, these are the things that people are talking about. So yeah, I'm busy. I mean, I've got 6 kids, 1 at home, 2 grandkids, a full-time real estate business on the county board, on my Lakes District, and a 7-term state legislator, but it works, right? And it works because of the input that you give us and the guidance you give us on ideas that you have, whether it's conservation or whether it's economic development or whether it's how the county interacts with the state and shared revenue. I mean, all of your input makes a big difference to us. So I appreciate your partnership and getting a lot of things done this session. I look forward to getting even more done.
Thank you very much, Scott. We're going to move to the other side of the Capitol in the Senate, District 24, Patrick Teston.
Well, thanks, Greg, and great to see everyone. And great to be here with my colleagues, Representative Rohrer, Representative Krug. So this session, I chair the Labor, Regulatory Reform, Military Affairs, and Veterans Affairs Committee, Vice Chair of the Senate Health Committee, Co-Chair of the Tax Exemptions Committee, serve on the Ag and Tourism Committee, several other committees, and then the big one for me this session was, this was my first term on the Joint Finance Committee. So obviously the Finance Committee is the most powerful legislative committee in the entire country. And I don't know how I've actually been able to do my job effectively for these last 6.5 years by not being on it, because it really gives you, you're in the room when we're making the big decisions, working on the budget, literally every single department, every single program, line by line. You're in the room helping make those decisions. And I think, with this budget, at the start of the process, it was really, it felt like Groundhog's Day, because the governor introduced his budget with his priorities, which I think even he knew was going to be dead on arrival when it hit the legislature. And in fact, when it came to the Finance Committee, the first thing that we did was strip out 545 policy provisions that were in his proposed budget and went back to base budget. And I think the biggest challenge that we faced throughout this entire process was that every single stakeholder group that came into our offices and were lobbying us kept referencing we have a $7 billion surplus. I mean, I heard it so many times, I finally had to get a giant whiteboard and take it in my office and write on it, we do not have a $7 billion surplus, it is more like a $2.6 billion surplus, ask accordingly. And so for us, I think that was the biggest challenge, because when you don't have a surplus, it's easy, you just say no. When you have a surplus, everyone's coming to you, it's like, okay, you gotta keep the math in the back of your head, like, okay, I said I'd be willing to go with this, and this, and next thing you know, it's like, boy, that $7 billion surplus is winding down pretty quick. So our challenge was making sure that we manage expectations throughout this process and making sure that we pass a budget that lives within our means, that makes key investments in key areas, and to ensure that if for some reason there's an economic downturn, that we don't have to tighten our belts. And as Scott had mentioned, one of the big areas that I thought was just a huge win was in shared revenue. This was long overdue, a generational change, 30 years in the making sure that we're diverting more money from Madison going back to our local units of government, and creating a new revenue stream for local units of government that's actually tied to the strength of our economy. So moving forward under the new Shared Revenue Supplement Program, It's tied to our sales taxes. So if we have a strong economy, great. More money's coming back to Wood County. More money's coming back to Grand Rapids, the city of Wisconsin Rapids, Marshfield. If times are tough, no different than any other household budget, we're going to tighten our belts. There's going to be less money going back. But I think it's one of those things right there that is indicative that we had to get done because we understand, and we've heard it from our local leaders, that a dollar doesn't stretch as far as it did 4 or 5 years ago. And on top of that, and I still can't believe this was accomplished, was that at the same time that we got a shared revenue done, a deal was negotiated between legislative Republicans as well as Governor Evers' administration that along with shared revenue, we are going to see one of the largest increases in the K-12 education in the state's history, over $1 billion new dollars going back into our classroom, alongside the fact that we had nearly $290 million going to the Choice and Charter program. I never dreamed that would be possible, given the dynamics of split government. But yet, we got it done. Significant investments into our into healthcare. I was the lead point on transportation during the budget. In fact, so to pull the curtain back a little bit, when you're on the finance committee, you get assigned different departments and agencies that you are then the lead person. You basically have to write the budget for that department. And when I was assigned my departments by co-chair Senator Howard Markline, the first one he gave me was DOT. And my first response was, what the hell did I ever do to you? Because transportation is not one of my forte by any means, but we dove into it. And when we started off on this process and we got the condition fund from Fiscal Bureau, our transportation budget was facing significant shortfalls and challenges. It was in the red. But we got really creative, rolled up our sleeves, and put in the black. In fact, this is probably one of the best budgets that I've ever voted on, because essentially we didn't bond hardly at all in this budget. We used a lot of one-time funds to pay for infrastructure projects, capital investments, and thank God none of our federal counterparts are here, because they would be shocked to hear this. Actually, they probably should hear this. We actually bought down debt in this budget. What a novel concept. We bought down over $400 million in debt in this budget. And the only project that was bonded for within DOT was for the Blantnick Bridge up in Superior and Duluth, which is a joint project between Wisconsin and Minnesota that we put money aside to hopefully get some money from the feds that probably won't even be enumerated. So for the first time in probably over a decade, when I first entered the legislature, I think we were bonding nearly 20 to 23 cents on the dollar in our DOT budget. We're down to about 15 cents on the dollar, and that continues to move in the right direction downwards. And so on top of that, we were also able to put in $100 million into the LRIP program, the Local Road Improvement Program, the supplement program, helping our local communities through a competitive grant process to help improve their local roads and their infrastructure. And then we also included an additional $150 million into our ARIP, a brand new program dealing with agricultural heavy roads. So this was from an infrastructure standpoint, this was a budget that covered every corner of the state, because I know in years previous, there was always a sense of frustration for those of us in outstate that there was almost a vacuum or sound of all the money getting sucked down into southeastern Wisconsin, the mega projects in the corridors in southeast, which are important, but yet we're falling behind. And thankfully, Scott talks about being in Adams County. Adams County right now, 3 of their 4 state legislators serve on the finance committee.
I'm smart enough not to.
Yeah, I never would have dreamed that would be humanly possible. Also within this budget, we got rid of the personal property tax, something that had languished even under Governor Walker's administration, and that Governor Evers had vetoed in previous budgets. We finally got that across the finish line. We proposed historic tax cuts in this budget, $3.5 billion in income tax cuts that would have impacted every single tax filer here in the state of Wisconsin, trying to make our tax climate more competitive. As it stands right now, Wisconsin's ranked around 29th in the nation, and I am a firm believer that Wisconsin cannot lead from the middle. When you take a look at the states that have seen the largest increases of people moving into them, they're states like Tennessee, Texas, Florida, South Dakota. these are states that have a much more competitive tax climate. Now, the tax cut proposal that we put forward, again, would impact every tax filer here in the state of Wisconsin. We are going from 4 brackets down to 3, and this put us on a path to eventually get to a flat tax. Now, unfortunately, as old governors do, and they get very creative with their line item vetoes, 95% of that tax cut was vetoed. Now, the reason, and if you read the governor's veto message, I think it's unfortunate because he cited that this was only a tax cut proposal for the 11 millionaires here in the state of Wisconsin. But in reality, that if you're a married couple who files jointly, if you make over $36,000 a year, that apparently is too much money in the governor's eyes, which is unfortunate. Which is why, for the first time since I've been in office, we actually exercised our veto override and overrode the governor's vetoes on his vetoes on the tax cuts. The Assembly's too short, 2 votes short, but there's an opportunity for individuals to reach out to some folks in key areas of the state, whether it's Representative Steve Doyle in the La Crosse area, Representative Shanklin over in the 71st, and others to make a strong case as to why these overrides need to happen. And on top of that, if we can't get the overrides in the Assembly put forward another tax cut, which was roughly about $2.9 billion, and took a different approach where it also is aimed at making sure that folks who are on fixed incomes, who are retirees, get some tax relief. That for a married couple who file jointly, that $150,000 of their retirement income is not taxable. Which, again, trying to do what we can to retain what we have, but also to attract if we want to grow our economy going into this next decade. So, they touched on a number of other issues that were being worked on, but overall, I think where we ended up in this budget process was in a really great place, a budget that really prioritized the needs. It proved that the legislature can walk and chew gum at the same time, that we can include tax cuts, we can still make critical investments in areas of infrastructure, education, healthcare, without expanding government programs, and putting our best foot forward and doing what we can to get wins, despite the fact that we're in a divided government. But so far, so good, and we've got a host of other issues that are out there lingering, but I think Wisconsin's in really great shape right now, and it's in part because of our colleagues in the legislature who have their ear to the ground, listening to the folks in their districts and keeping the thumb on the pulse and making sure that we keep moving the state forward and not backsliding.
And because Washington makes us look so much better.
Oh, that's easy.
Thank you very much. Thank all 3 of you. All 3 have kind of touched on this topic, but economic development is obviously a major item, not only in Wisconsin, but nationally. Can you talk a little bit about economic development? Maybe there's some things that folks can do to help that. And I know we need a strong, of course, technical college and university system, and there's a lot of news certainly coming out of the, the university system now. And maybe if you could, we'll start with Senator Teston, we'll head that direction.
Well, sure. So as it relates to economic development, so again, I can't stress this enough, making sure that we have a more competitive tax climate. I mean, people can go and voice their opinions at a ballot box and vote for their elected officials at every level of government, but the most consequential vote someone can make is with their feet. And that is plain as day when you look at census data. Because the states that saw largest outmigration were New York, Illinois, California. And what's ironic is that as you take a look at our neighboring states, Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, from a tax perspective, they're much more competitive. Iowa is on pace to have a flat tax within 4 years. Illinois has a flat tax of 4.95%, which ironically, in 2020, there was a ballot initiative that was being pushed by Governor Pritzker that would do away with their flat tax and put in place a progressive income tax, which was resoundingly rejected. And this is a state that went for like 25, 30 points for President Biden. So even in very blue states, people recognize that they vote with their wallets. And so that's one area that we need to do better on. Another area that we're working on, and we've got a bill that's being drafted right now, is helping with business startups. So Wisconsin lags in the nation. We're ranked about 49th out of 50 when it comes to new business startups here in the state. So trying to inject more money into venture capital. Back in 2013, the legislature passed and signed into law the Badger Fund of Funds, which we actually refunded in this budget at $225 million, and has been wildly successful, and we're trying to build upon that. Some other areas that we're really trying to dive in on as far as economic development goes is affordable housing. We put significant money into this budget and in a series of bills trying to help with our housing stock here in the state of Wisconsin, especially in rural areas of the state. Because we hear from developers all the time, look, we'd love to invest in communities like Wisconsin Rapids or others, but what's the incentive? The cost of building right now is through the roof. Inflation is making it cost prohibitive. And yet we have a huge need, because the issues that we talked about back in 2016, 2018, 2020, 2022, you can't throw a stone in the state of Wisconsin and not hit a help wanted sign. I mean, this still remains one of our biggest challenges here in the state, is maintaining a credible workforce. And so doing what we can to help with employers, help with our housing stock, this is all tied together. And another area that I've been working on, and several others have as well, is what can we do from a regulatory perspective that is actually going to help professionals come into the state of Wisconsin. Now, we know over the course of the last couple of years, we've had significant challenges at the SPS as it relates to licensing and credentialing. Here, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. It seems like Secretary Harrith has done a decent job of turning things around, and the backlogs are being erased. But create a more regulatory parity with states around us to allow for instance, medical professionals to take their license, if they're in Minnesota or Iowa, and be able to come across state lines and practice in places like Wisconsin. And so I think a lot of times when we talk about some of these challenges on how we can address, some of the things that are facing our communities, people often look for the silver bullet. That doesn't exist. But when you can take a multifaceted approach and work on things from a number of different angles, it all adds up. As it relates to the UW system, our technical colleges, now I know there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of headlines as it relates to where things are at. And I'll just say this, in the state budget, we put forward pay increases for all state employees. And I think missed opportunity that the committee that handles salary increases chose to exclude the UW system this time around because of some ongoing disputes between folks in the legislature and primarily with UW-Madison. I just think it's a missed opportunity because as Rob knows, and I've had discussions with Chancellor Gibson, we can have our feuds and pick our fights with UW-Madison all day. I'm right there with it. But it's hurting our smaller universities like UWSP, like UW-Superior, Platteville, Oshkosh. And I'm hopeful and remain hopeful that the disputes between folks in Madison and leadership, primarily at UW-Madison, can get resolved because I think it's a missed opportunity that we're leaving these employees out. And it's not just our UW professors and faculty, it's the janitors, the folks that run the maintenance facilities who are expecting these raises, and I'm hoping that we can get these done.
Scott, any comment?
Yeah. Just quickly, I think when it comes to economic development, I think that's the one area that Adams County's had a leg up on the last few years. We were one of the few counties in Adams County that actually has one of the highest population growth numbers in the last few years. So population growth in Adams has been close to 3% because of some of the things that are ongoing surrounding tourism, agriculture, and some of those things. And we need to capitalize on that more by all of the things that Pat talked about, especially housing. When you try to recruit professionals into central Wisconsin and say we've got competitive wages and competitive industries, but you can't buy a house, it's pretty damn hard to get people to come here. So I think that's why we put such a huge effort in on the Housing and Real Estate Committee that I serve on the $500 million real estate workforce housing package that not only just help developers, but help redevelop upstairs apartments at Main Street buildings, rehab old buildings that people want to move out of so we can start clearing up stock and getting people a chance to move into a house. And we've got enough real estate agents here today that can sympathize with this, that you had a family that would want to come to Wisconsin Rapids 7, 8 years ago, want to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot house with 2 garages. It was the typical 160, right? 160,000 for a typical family home. That same home right now, if I polled my colleagues, I see 3 or 4 of us in here, that's an easy 240 right now in just 3 years. I mean, that is a 60% increase in price because inventory is non-existent. People are reluctant to move from their forever home into a downsizing option at the end of their days because it's too expensive. That is our biggest challenge on economic development right now, is housing. I hear it from every industry across the city of Wisconsin Rapids, everywhere else in Marshfield, especially when you're recruiting doctors into the area and they're looking to pay $500,000 for homes just on the outskirts of Marshfield, which I don't know how you do real estate in Marshfield. That's just a Wild West up there, but it's a different story. I think that's our biggest challenge. But the biggest, like I said, the biggest thing we have going for us is our broadband availability, our quality of education, our tourism, our agriculture. I mean, all of the main stuff is there. Now we got to peel back the onion a little bit and start fixing some of the secondary stuff. And I think housing is the first one. I think what we did this session was a good start. It is not anywhere near enough to even start creating enough inventory that we need to start getting that mobile movement amongst seniors downsizing and families wanting to come in, et cetera, et cetera. So that's our biggest problem right now in economic development.
Donna, from your perspective.
Well, I wrote down a few things when you asked that question, and Pat and Scott did a good job of talking about that. I agree that the tax climate is a real issue. Our upper bracket now is 7.65%. Surrounding states are down at 3-4%. High income earners are not going to want to come to our state at a 7.65% tax bracket. And so we tried really hard to bring all those tax brackets down and create a tax climate that was going to be competitive with our surrounding states and attractive to high-income earners and other people that wanted to move into our state. They mentioned workforce and housing. Workforce is a huge issue. I believe that we need to try to get people into the workforce as quickly as possible. I have a friend who's thinking about going to nursing school. There was a big discussion about, do I do the ADN program, do I do the BSN program? And so we had a long conversation about that. And I said, I think his goal is to be a nurse practitioner. But I said, get your ADN and you can work as a nurse while you get your BSN and get higher education. So we've got to work on those things. I am a huge supporter of the apprenticeship program. So in the K through 12 program, introducing people to careers early so that they're not spending 2 years in college not knowing what they want to do and also wasting a lot of money. Helping people to come to a decision about careers to get them in the workforce. Every industry is having staffing problems. There's not one industry that's not. There's competition. Oh my, it's better to be an electrician than a carpenter. A lot of things like that. So we have to help people make those decisions. I agree with Pat that these compacts that we're working on are very important. If you're a nurse in Minnesota, there should not be a lot of hoops to have to jump through if you want to work in Wisconsin or Illinois or Iowa. And so these compacts with the various professions really help with people deciding that they want to move across borders, and Nancy Vandermeer's done a really good job in working on those. Inflationary challenges are all around us. I have a grandson that lives with me right now because I don't know how he would ever be able to afford an apartment in Marshfield. And so we're trying to, I'm trying to help him with budgeting and things like that. But it's very difficult for some of these younger people. He is starting a welding program up in Marshfield, I think, in January. So he has some hopes of increasing, his income. But we've got to help younger people make those decisions because we want them to be contributing, productive members of society. The other thing that I would just like to mention very briefly is incarcerated individuals. they really are the answer to some of our workforce issues. I think that you all know we're building a new jail in Wood County. We're $40 million over budget. And I had a really hard time voting for that project. But one of the reasons that I did is because we have increased program areas. And we're going to be able to bring people in to help these inmates get some marketable skills so that when they get out, there's some purpose, they have some skills that can, and whatever you all can do as a business community, as an educational community, to help us do that. I feel so strongly that that is a population that we haven't tapped very well to help them with our workforce issues. So they're just some of the comments that I have.
Thank you. You all mentioned kind of working, as they say in politics, across the aisle, cooperating between the two parties. What are some tidbits or some advice you could give to municipalities and local government, et cetera, how they can kind of work together? Because in the end, if one is successful, we're all successful. So maybe some comments on that. Anybody can just jump right in.
I really feel passionate about this because when I do school presentations to second, third, fourth grade kids all across my district who come to the Capitol or wherever it is if I'm at their local school, and I'm talking to them, the first thing I tell them is that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in proportion. I've literally had to use that with legislators in the last 2 years as well. Like, can you just stop talking for a minute and just listen to what somebody else is saying and try to process where they're coming from? So, I mean, you know, everybody always makes fun of the saying, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten. That's exactly how government should work at this point. We spend way too much time on social media, worried about what was on MSNBC versus what was on Fox, who was getting you, blah, blah, blah. I don't watch either. I don't care what you're hearing either. You've got to talk to the people in your communities. You've got to be more engaged with your outside of the Capitol type thing for us. Outside of your realm of influence, wherever you're working, get out of the workplace a little bit, do some more of the business after 5 type of things, get to know everybody. And I tell legislators this session and last couple of sessions, I get to be the old timer in the caucus and kind of castigate them a little bit because they're so spoiled right now because we've got such a good business climate in the Capitol where we have MOUs and we have guaranteed debate times, we know we're going to be done by a certain time. When I started, we used to have debates that would go on for 12, 16, 18, 20 hours, and we would have all this time in between where you have to sit, hang out, learn who each other are, get to know each other a little bit better. I think, you know, we've kind of gone to the point where we function so good that we don't have a chance to talk to each other and get to know each other. And I joked about it in our committee yesterday, is I talked to my ranking Democrat on my committee more than I talked to most of my family. Because that's what I've got to do right now to get my campaign and election bills signed into laws. I've got to make sure that Democrats are okay, because if the Democrats aren't okay, the governor's not going to sign anything, right? Which I think my foray into local government the last 2 years has taught me that lesson too, is that, you know, there's not really R&D at the county board. I mean, there are, you know who each other are. But if I'm sitting on county board with my friend Gordy Carlson from the town of Monroe, and Gordy and I are great friends, and we agree on 90% of the issues, if I say anything wrong about ATVs, I might get punched, right? So at least in local government, you don't know what's preordained, what the outcome's going to be. You have a lot more conversation, I think, in local government than you do at the State House, because our caucuses kind of demand where we're going to end up. We push each other towards an answer, so by the time we get to the floor, you're never going to see a vote come up. I shouldn't say never. It's happened a little bit before I got there, but you'll rarely, if ever, see a bill come to the floor in the State House that's going to get voted down. It just doesn't happen. Whereas on county board, I don't know, right? I walk in and it's like, okay, I think we're going to be good. I don't know. So I think there's benefits to both, right? I like to be sitting in our caucuses having conversations, knowing where we're going to go, coming up with a cohesive answer, but I also appreciate at the local level that we're all individual. We all know exactly what we want. We all know exactly what our constituents need, and we vote accordingly on local government. So there's benefits to both, but I think people just need to communicate a hell of a lot more in all of them.
Any comments?
So it was interesting. we've mentioned, it's kind of interesting that both of us are here today after what happened in campaigns and elections yesterday with hearing bipartisan bills and bills that a Republican was on, a Democrat was on, and all Democrats, except for you. You signed up on some of those bills. And so, it was a very interesting day. And something came up, and somebody said something, and I said, because we talk to each other. Remember when I said that? And they said, well, how did you know that? Well, we had a conversation.
Oh, you knew you had the same birthday.
We knew
as
we
the
had the
Democrat
same
committee was saying.
birthdays.
Yeah.
So a Democrat and I authored this bill that Scott was talking about. We were born on the same day. So we're going to have this combined birthday party in February. And somebody said, well, how did you figure that out? And I said, because we talk to each other, and that's how we found out. So, and don't get me wrong, there are major differences in the two parties, okay? And you probably know what some of those issues are, and we could have heated discussions about those issues. But like Scott said, between 85 to 90% of our bills that we pass are bipartisan, and some of them are unanimous, where nobody says no. So
That doesn't get the headline, though.
but that doesn't get the headline because you see it's not sensational, doesn't sell papers, and so and it doesn't have sexy sound bites and things like that you can put on TV. So he's right. Communication is so important. I try to be at the Capitol 3 days a week. Sometimes I'm not. I try to have people in. Yesterday, Robin Vining was in my office. Some people were there that I needed to talk about. Robin's one of the
Here, they
Democrats.
tell me all the time, by the way.
Huh?
They tell me who was all going to your office, too. So.
I know. I have a very nice office. Y'all can come and see me anytime. And so, thank you, taxpayers, for all of our offices, right? But communication is such an important thing, and Scott's right. We talk a lot more. I said last night at a meeting that the two most horrible people to give a microphone to are a preacher and a politician, and so we tend to like to talk a lot, and so we do need to listen more. But I think we're doing better, and I hope that we're setting a standard in our committee with hearing Democrat bills, and we'll see where they go. But Scott's right. If we have a Democrat on the bill, it has a higher probability of being signed by the governor, because then they're able to go to the governor and say, it's got bipartisan support. And a lot of the things that we're doing is common sense. So communication, talking to people, inviting them into your office, sitting down, having a conversation that may have nothing to do with politics. How's your family? Where'd you go on vacation? That kind of stuff, because we're all people before we're elected officials, and people like to believe that they're important and worth having a conversation over, and then hopefully that can at least help us to agree and work together on the things that we can agree on. Not to say that we won't have heated discussions about some other things.
Yeah, that's next week, though. So.
That is next.
Anything-
Oh, that is next week.
Yes, it is.
Anything to add from the Senate side quickly, or?
Yeah, I mean, Olga, great points. One thing that we did as it relates specifically for local governments to help with collaborations was actually within the shared revenue discussions. In fact, we created a new innovation fund for local units of government to help with consolidation of services. Now, I know for a lot of our municipalities, especially here in Wood County, Portage County, and others, town governments, they already run very lean and very efficiently as is. It's almost bare bone budgets. But if there's room for improvements where you can have combined services that are going to be to the benefit of the taxpayers within those communities and provide those efficiencies, then it's a win-win. And specifically, money was set aside specifically for smaller townships and municipalities to help with grants for rural areas. So as this program gets hashed out and developed and the rules get established, I'm encouraging all my town chairs to take advantage of this new program, because anything that you guys can do to help consolidate services and make things more efficient, it's a win-win for everyone. It makes your budget's leaner, it helps with your tax base, and just one of the things that we try to do to help make things more efficient from the top down and bottom up.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. We want to just kind of break here for just a second would like to recognize any elected officials in any capacity in our audience, and there's no order here, but if you would like to I can recognize you, please stand and just give kind of a brief background, doesn't have to be fancy, just kind of this is what I am, this is what I do. So I know we have a table with multiple, so Lance, you're smiling, you want to start?
Sure, yeah, give me a microphone.
No, the microphone stays here, by the way.
I am Lance Plum, I'm the Wood County Board Chairman, and I've served in that capacity for quite some time. And one of the things that we don't realize oftentimes locally is the accessibility that we have and the relationships and friendships with our state legislators. I can tell you, as I go around the state and I meet with other county board chairs, I'm amazed at how many county boards and other local officials don't talk to their state legislators. And I talk to one of these guys like every day of the week. So there's an open line of communication all the time. We are incredibly lucky in that respect. And I certainly can applaud them also for the shared revenue package. One of the other hats I wear is I'm the president and chairman of the board of the Wisconsin Counties Association. One of our most important issues over time has been shared revenue. There was a time when the state funded, first of all, county government is an administrative arm of state government. They legislate, they pass the rules, and they tell us to do it. Over time, they used to fund about 70 to 80% of that, and it got to the point where they were funding about 70% of those operations.
7%.
The rest of it came from property tax revenue and some of the other local revenue sources. There was a recognition at the state legislatures, led by three of these people sitting up here, where he said, you can mandate it, we have to do it, there's services that have to be provided, and we need to fund it. And these people were at the forefront of getting that done. We now have the opportunity to enact, to initiate, and to fulfill some of those promises and programs that we roll out for the people. So, I'm proud to represent the people of my district. I'm here in Grand Rapids in the city. I look at the county as a whole, because that's one of my responsibilities. But you're lucky to live here. We have great relationships with the tech colleges, with the university system. As both the representatives, the senator said, we all work together, and we work on similar issues everywhere we go. The other thing happened in the county, and supervisor, legislator, Rohrer mentioned it, it's kind of a big facility being built downtown at the jail. And somebody asked me, why are you building a big jail? I said, it's the last thing I want to do, but it's something that we have to do. Luckily in our county, when we survey the people, we say, what's the number one issue? They say public safety. When I walk out the door, I want to know I'm going to come home at the end of the day. And luckily in our county, and I'd say it, they're not here, but if you break the law in Wood County, our sheriff's going to arrest you, our DA's going to prosecute you, our judges are going to sentence you, and you might end up in that facility. And we had a situation where we're spending a couple of $1 million a year every year shipping prisoners out of the county.
Yeah, they put a nice little hole in my budget in Adams. Thanks, Lance.
Yeah, we boarded a number of inmates in Adams County, and by the way, Wapaka County isn't real happy either. They're going to take about an $800,000 hit this year. But anyway, that's the reason for the facility. It was just something that was necessary. Long-term cost over about 30 years was about a $30 million savings by actually building the jail. So if you ask me what's going on in the county, that's it. Every one of these gentlemen is accessible. My number's in the book, in the phone book as well, and I know all of these people are. So thank you for the work you do. You work extremely well with us as a county board, and I know the other local boards. Thanks.
Thank you. Others? Anyone else that elected officials? If you'd
Introduce yourself.
you can introduce yourself. Go right ahead.
I'm not bashful.
I was going to say, don't be shy.
I'm vice chair of Public Safety Committee. 2 weeks ago, we gave our jailers a $5 an hour pay raise. We went from $21 an hour to $26 an hour. The governor gave the federal jailers $33 an hour. We just have to bring our people up a little bit. That was a big thing with me, being on public safety. Marathon County, they're housing their prisoners out of the county. They have the facility. They don't have the people around. Tragic, terrible. We want to get a handle on that before we get our new jail done, which will be the fall of next year. So that's a big thing with the public safety aspect of it.
Thank you.
Bill Clendenny, one of the 5 bills on the county board. 3 of them are here. But anyways, I've been on county government for 38 years with Sheriff County. I was on the county board there and also on the town board in the town of Oasis. And I'm now on the town board in the town of Grand Rapids and Oasis. Enjoy.
Thank you.
And I'm Bill Light, and I'm one of the 4 or 5 bills. We can't quite decide how many there are. I'm chair of the SEED Committee, Conservation, Education, Economic Development. I want to go a little bit different direction here. I saw something yesterday that really alarmed me. I'm an environmentalist. I've always been an environmentalist. That's why I'm on the committee I'm on, or the 2 committees I'm on. I was at a ag, land use and environment steering committee meeting yesterday. Supervisor from O'Connell County was there, and he had pictures on his cell phone that he showed us he wanted to talk about. Unfortunately, we couldn't. But calves being born 5 miles from a facility that produces PFAS, and little calves that had tumors on their bellies and were losing all their hair that early in life. So clean water has always been an issue with me. Thanks to the support that I've had from the county board, we've developed in Wood County a number of committees, a citizens environmental committee, and then a 6-county collaborative, which you're going to be hearing more about, I think, in the future. We work on environmental issues. We're proud of what we do in those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Others like to? Yes, go right ahead.
I'm Lori Giamatti. I'm the Rome Town Chairwoman, and I have served in county and town government for a very long time. Took a break for a couple of years, and then just came back last year as a supervisor, and then decided it was time to step it up and run for town chair. Don't know why, but I did it. Glad I did. But then I got myself a nice present wrapped in a big bow of solar panels coming to town on land we don't own. I'm not going to go there just yet. I'll have questions for in a little while, but that's okay. We'll deal with that. But I do want to thank our officials for the shared revenue package. It's going to be steady for the next 2 years, but being in town and county government, I had always enjoyed that work. I was very active in the county association as Lance for many years. Respected his work as the chair of that organization, and I'm very grateful for the Wisconsin Towns Association, which is often underrated, doesn't get a whole lot of respect or recognition, I shouldn't say respect, but recognition for the work that they do on behalf of the towns and now villages, because they do advocate for us quite a bit on the floor down in Madison, and they do a lot of work for us. There was a bill that was out there by Senator Ballwig, number 47, that I wish would have gotten just a little bit more push. It was for JDAs, Joint Development Agreements, that would have helped us with solar energy. But anyway, we'll get there a little bit later with my questions. But I really love my work. I'm passionate about it. I believe I'm a public servant, not always a politician, but that kind of changes gears depending on the subject. But I do enjoy this. I do love interacting with people. And I do believe there's a lot of issues out there that are concerning to towns, especially when we see, one thing I'm excited about is our town is helping Adams County pull itself up out of that poverty ranking. We're seeing ourselves really coming up due to tourism. One thing that we're really faced with is the housing shortage, especially due to the tourism, is that a lot of our affordable housing is being lost to the rental pools. And that's just because of the tourism aspect of the golfing industry, which is great on one side, but then we're losing it because of people buying them for the short-term rental pool, and so we're trying to balance that. So those are just some of the issues that I'm interested in, as well as, and nothing against the county, but this is an issue for the county board and us to have a discussion on. As we see tourism growing, the sales tax revenue is coming in, but then how do we have a discussion about sharing that? So, and that's now tied to this new shared revenue. So that's another piece of the discussion that I think is very important. So those are just some of the things that I'm looking at, and I'm looking forward to this next year of having some of those conversations, and welcome Megan. And I know tourism is an interesting thing for us, because right now we have a DMO that we work with, but then that's a little bit harder for Megan as she promotes the rest of the county. So that's something that we're also working on. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good morning. My name is Kathy Stevenson. I was recently elected to the Wisconsin Rapids Public School Board. And I'm very proud to serve on that board because I believe we have an excellent school district. And we service, well over 4,500 kids in our district every year, and how important the work is that our teachers do every day. And I would just ask our legislators to continue to support public education, but also as you're looking at bills and you're looking at spending and revenues for public education, that you come to us and understand what we need. Because sometimes I think when it comes to legislating and it comes to we look at the last couple of decades in public school expenditures, sometimes there's a disconnect. So we really need to be talking to one another, and we need to be working together to provide the best schools we can in the state of Wisconsin. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're at the point of the program. We're just going to open it up. They love getting questions. That's what they do for a living. So just going to open it up. I can recognize if anyone has any questions. Uh-oh.
That was fast.
I didn't even get that out. So.
So thank you guys for all the work that you guys are doing. Synergy, of course, is a regional entity for economic development. So of course I'm going to ask you some economic development questions. You guys mentioned the WIDA housing tax credits. Super appreciative that there was a pool that was specific to rural communities because most of ours in our service area are. But my question is, in the writing of those tax credits and programs that are available, there are some specific rules on how the zoning has to be done and their comprehensive plans have to be done. Many of our rural communities cannot afford the $7,000 to $15,000 it is to redo their comp plan. Are there any discussions on how they're going to address that so we can get those funds into those smaller communities while still having an up-to-date comp plan? So just some thoughts on what you guys are hearing.
Well, yeah, I will. Yeah, I'll jump. That's in the weeds. That's a good one. So I think the biggest thing that we did in that bill is we gave everybody 2 years. From now till the 2-year deadline when the bill went into effect. You've got to make these reviews. You've got to find what your rules are. Whatever your rules are at that point are going to be final. So it doesn't require that anybody has to go redo an entire process. It does give them that opportunity. Thankfully, the shared revenue bill is putting that money back into our communities hand over fist. A provision in the Brewers bill that we did is also bringing more money back into our communities to help offset cost of functioning of your government and not having to pay the state so much for administrative fees. So I don't think there's any shortage of getting money back into our local communities to make decisions. One of the things I think some of our communities were smart about was taking some of the ARPA money that was available, putting that in towards some of those ideas after the federal government allowed them to basically have free reign over ARPA money. If folks have some ARPA left over, there's still time to spend some of those dollars too. So I don't think money's the issue so much, but it is my biggest concern of those bills is that people are not going to take the time to do it. And I think that's the biggest push that we've got to make in all of our local governments to be more open to accessory dwelling units, zoning requirements for offsets. I mean, all of these things that we want to make sure that we keep beautification of our neighborhoods. That's one fine thing, but we also have to make sure that we open up space that people can actually develop. And that's our biggest problem right now is a lot of the zoning requirements and overall comp plans are just not set up that way enough. So I think, money-wise, I think we're okay. But if people have those individual concerns, I mean, we can absolutely take a look at what we've got in some of the $3 billion kind of in the checkbook yet and try to help a little bit more. But I think we've put as much money back in our local communities as we can right now.
Thank you. I appreciate
Great question,
that.
though, yeah.
Yeah, we just had a conversation with some local municipalities on some concerns about zoning, right? Because we all know when you want to change zoning, it's a difficult process because everyone has to agree on that board or that council depending on what it is. So I appreciate that that's top of mind.
And even going a little further into zoning, I think one of the things that we see too often is I don't think towns take enough responsibility for their own zoning and leave themselves open to what the counties require of them for zoning. So I'm hopeful, as I'm engaged on a county board, is to try to encourage more towns to opt out of county zoning and take care of their own responsibilities. Because one of the things that drives me nuts on county board in Adams County is 2/3 of our agenda every time is rezoning properties that we have really nothing to do with besides collecting a little bit of tax on. So I'd really like to see our towns more active in taking care of their own responsibilities and zoning and making those local decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
Yes, Senator, on Senate Bill 274, which is the real estate transfer fee, how is that coming?
So that bill was just heard in the Senate yesterday. So I don't know if it's planned to be exec. So obviously, just met with the Wood County delegation and our Register of Deeds here in Wood County.
Thank you, Tiffany. Yes,
Yeah.
wherever you are. Yeah.
And she's brought up some good points and voiced her concern as to the bill moving forward. And I know I've had conversations with Senator Quinn of having to go to 50-50 as opposed to where they're at right now. So we'll see. It's, like I said, just heard yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to go back and look at the public hearing, but
I mean, it is amazing though, because without some of our perspectives being on county board, I don't think this would have even come up. We would have just passed it, been like, okay, whatever. But people don't realize that our county governments don't necessarily have registered deeds offices on their tax levy. I'm not sure if it's on the levy in Wood County, but it's not on the levy in Adams County, and real estate's down 28% in sales this year. So when we're talking about changing something that's good for consumers, it's going to hurt our government on the back end of it. So that's why I engaged too with Stashel and Quinn on the Senate side, saying, hey, let's make that split quicker. The state doesn't need the money, but my local register of deeds office doesn't need to be on my tax levy either. So
Not only that, but we do the work.
right,
We
exactly.
should get
Yeah,
paid.
yep.
So I called Senator Quinn and Representative Green's office yesterday, and Stashel, of course, is the lead senator, and talked to them about the 50-50. The word that I got is that Senator Stashel wants that progressive going down because of the impact that it has on state revenue. If I had my druthers, the state would get 20% and we'd keep 80% because we do all of the work. But that bill just makes that progressive 80-20 to 70-30, and then in 3 years it goes to 50-50. To me, that makes no sense, but it makes a lot of sense to Senator Stashel.
Yeah.
So that's the thing right now is Senator Stashel believes that progression will have minimal impact on revenue coming into the state.
So I'm on the
Glad to
housing and
see
real
the three
estate.
on it.
What's that?
What?
I say I'm glad to see the three on it.
Yeah, I'm on the Housing and Real Estate Committee in the Assembly. This bill's not going to go forward unchanged if I have anything to say about it, which I do. I mean, that's kind of what I do in campaigns and elections too, is I don't care what the authors think. The bill comes to a committee, it's for the committee to decide how the bill is going to progress. So I've been engaged on this since the start. Tiffany was on, as soon as that bill was drafted, she called me. I mean, she was on like you wouldn't believe. So, and then our Register of Deeds in Adams County too, it's the exact same boat. So I mean, it's nice to have such a strong association and communicate with us what the problem is. So.
And I think we're both would be supportive of going to 50-50 right away instead of this progressive.
Thank you. Other questions for our, yes, sir?
Yeah, just on the multifamily real estate side of things, I think there's, a couple, in 2021, a couple commercial changes to, Wisconsin's commercial housing code that I think affected retrofitting certain properties, converting stuff from commercial to multifamily. And, a lot of young professionals, I think, aren't necessarily looking for the 3-2 yet. Maybe they will be at some point, but I think addressing certain multifamily has its benefits. And one of those things was, on any new housing, 3 units or above, fire suppression system needing to be installed, which I think on new builds is pretty easy, but makes retrofitting a lot of these buildings and converting them from something commercial over to multifamily pretty prohibitive, because retrofitting is way more expensive than initial install. Has talk of any of that stuff over the last couple of years changed? I know there's other stuff out there that's made some of that conversion a bit more prohibitive, getting something zoned for residential multifamily.
Yeah.
Any conversations about that?
We did, and usually those things it's a rulemaking process that that WIDA and the agencies go through on updating the building code, and usually those things don't see the light of day in the legislature. But on the Housing and Real Estate Committee, we brought everybody to the table and say, okay, you want us to update the building code for the next 3 years, tell us why. Tell us what's in it, what's changing, because usually for the last 25, 30 years, it's been, all right, it's up, let's just vote it out, let the agency do what they want to do. We're not doing that anymore. So, I mean, there have been multiple discussions in committee hearings, actually, about how we need to update our building code as an entirety and what that impact is on lending and other industries surrounding the actual development of it, that are going to be impacted too. So we're not going to update the building code anymore until we know exactly what's in it and why we're going to do it, so.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, other comments? Yes.
So all three of you state legislators have heard me talk about environmental clean water issues multiple times. I see the smiles up there. But I'm hearing rumblings that they're following the 2019 Year of Clean Drinking Water, 13 water bills. I'm hearing rumblings that there may be more legislative effort along those lines in this session. Am I correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Bill. I mean, again, going back to it, we've taken a multifaceted approach as it relates to, excuse me, dealing with groundwater, and whether it's dealing with phosphorus, nitrates, runoff, you name it. I mean, we've all been at the table working on these issues, and in fact, in this budget, we set aside $125 million to put into a trust fund to deal with PFAS contamination as we await the guidelines and recommendations that come down from the EPA. Now, I'll be the first to admit, Bill, is $125 million enough? No, it's probably a drop in the bucket, but it's a step in the right direction as we learn more about this as more and more townships and we do more testing as it relates to PFAS. We've got to be proactive, and so there's a bill that's working its way through right now that's been authored by Senator Rob Coles and Senator Wimberger from the Alloway and Green Bay area, dealing with this on what's going to qualify for remediation and cleanup for PFAS contamination. You've seen Procter & Johnson up in Marinette. They put in I believe it was a $6 million facility to help with the plume in the town of Peshtigo. And so I think it's going to be sort of what we've done on a number of different fronts with like the Producer-Led Watershed Grant Program, working with the well comp program within DNR.
Like Pete and Well.
Yeah.
I mean, I could dovetail off of all these things, and when we talk about who's all come to the table, I mean, we're looking at people who have kind of built that table. I mean, in 2010 and 11, this wasn't on anybody's radar, period. Republicans, Democrats, whatsoever. And it took citizen input and guidance to bring it to the forefront, and this entire conversation has changed 180 degrees in the last 10 years.
Good to hear.
And we can absolutely take huge credit for it here in central Wisconsin. If anybody was out on any of our area lakes this year, there are so many innovative practices that are happening right now for surface water. Our groundwater program is amazing. We're funding county conservation offices like we've never had before. I mean, you name it, and it is finally one of those things that's in the top 5 of every conversation when it comes to budgets and bills and everything else. So I think we've come just further on this in my time than anything else. And I love that we're all at the same table talking about the same issues now, even after even though the task force is over and those bills are done, doesn't mean that we quit doing anything. It's a little less headline grabbing now because it's not the year of clean water, or we're not doing a task force, but it's all still there. So.
Yeah, in fact, too, Bill, the Farmland Preservation Tax Credit Bill, I think we're actually going to get this one done. And again, this is a program that's been around. Wisconsin was a national leader on this back in the 70s, which helps with the care and management of soil and water. And this is a program that has seen a precipitous decline in recent years because, one, it's a 15-year requirement to be enrolled in this program, and two, just like everything else with inflation, it hasn't seen any increases. And so, we've worked with the folks on the conservation side of things on this, the A Coalition, to redraft this and make it a little bit more user-friendly, drop it from a 15-year requirement down to 10, up the reimbursements for the 3 existing qualifications for the Farmland Preservation Tax Credit Program, and then create a 4th one. And so passed out of the Senate unanimously, which I'm still shocked by. It sounds like in conversations that we've had with the Speaker's office in the Assembly, we've got to make a couple minor tweaks to it to get his sign-off and support to have it move forward in their House. But again, this is going to be another tool in the toolbox to help with best management practices as it relates to our agricultural community here in the state.
Sounds good. I know you had a question?
Actually, I have 2. The first one will be a little easier. Just a quick comment, though. I admire you, and it's easier, I think, at your level because there's more of you. You can discuss things and communicate a little bit differently than we on the town board level. you have 5 and 3, you get into the issue
Yeah,
of
right, you
quorums.
can talk to 2 other people and that's about it, yeah.
Yeah, and so it gets a little bit harder for us, and I wish we had that opportunity to do that a little bit more so that it didn't always get so heated at a board meeting night. But it would be nice if we could communicate the issues a little bit easier, but I understand being a good person, compromise the middle ground, because it would be nice. But getting back to affordable housing, on the question of short-term rentals, with that bill that was passed, we find ourselves often limited at Plan Commission and often beat up on that issue. So we're really limited on what we're allowed to do. One of the questions that does come up, and we see right now, the appetite for those is really getting questioned a lot in the media and across the country, especially with some of the things that just recently came down in New York that doesn't apply to us, is density. Because we're not sure quite yet how it affects home values, but it's also affecting neighborhoods with parking and what we try to do to limit it at Plan Commission. So the question would be is there anything you can do to help us? We're trying to figure out what we can do at our level, but even Lake Association, for example, Scott, you know, you're in Arrowhead. The community here doesn't know what that means, but we have covenants. So what can you do to help us? What can we do? What conversation can we have on density? Because there might be 5 homes, $300,000 of value, or they may vary. All but one is a full-time resident. What does that do to our neighborhoods? What can we do on the density issue? What ideas can we put together as government bodies? You know, so, and again, I commend Wood County on this level too. They can at least work with you. Adams County, we need to work on our connections too. Town, villages, cities, working with the county, then to the state. And I'd like to emulate what they do.
First of all, I think we should have another forum like this in November on housing and real estate, because it's been great. A lot of these questions involving, housing in our neighborhoods. And I think the ease in what we do right now in state regulation, it lends itself to easier development in the cities than it does in our towns, right? Because we're all on private well, private septic. That's my bigger concern about density issues, is can we handle the load for the environment, right? You know, Bill brought it up. I mean, if we've got 3,000 septic systems right now in Rome, but I want to encourage more growth. Can we handle more septic? Can we handle that? I mean, do we have to look at different systems? So I think, as we give as much flexibility as possible to towns and counties to make those decisions, you're putting yourself at peril when you're competing with other entities, though, too, if we give you too much flexibility and you go too far. So I appreciate where the concern is, but I don't think you'll see the state weigh in on what you're going to have to decide works best for Rome as far as those issues.
But I see one issue holding up a decision on another issue.
That's right.
So that's where I sometimes get concerned as a town, where you take one issue and hold up a decision making on another issue that's really affecting us. But moving on, I don't want to take up too much time on that, but I often see that being an issue, and that ends the conversation, and then it affects us all.
Right.
So yes, septic, right now it's not a problem for us. We've had that conversation locally. Also, just like with our Rome Town Center, which is the focal point of the town. It's our gem. It's going to be like our downtown.
Yeah.
So we're not going to let sewer and water right now hold us up for an environmental issue, just like lakes and wake boats and water quality hold us up, which you also know is a local issue.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I understand. Yeah.
right, so let's not stop the conversation on housing, affordable housing, and people not being able to live in our community because of short-term rentals. Because we have people coming in that need to work there. Sand Valley now becoming the largest employer in Adams County because they have to move to Washera, they have to move to Wood, they have to move to wherever, so they can now work here, and we need housing.
Yeah, and I think that's by design a little bit too, is trying to make sure that that impact does spread. I mean, I like the ability for that impact to spread beyond the town of Rome and into the town a little more. I don't like seeing the on-site development as much as I would like them to see develop off-site, which is why we did the bills we did this session, to encourage development and to give incentives for developers to put in infrastructure to not be costly to the towns and municipalities, that the state can give this pool of money to these folks to develop off-site so there can be housing in the community when people are transitioning back out. So it was one of the focuses of the housing bills, is to make sure that we give that infrastructure support to developers, especially for towns like Rome, Big Flats, Colburn, all right around that, that campus of Sand Valley, so.
And we just spent our own money to put in a water main and a new road so that we can now work with a Von Briesen designer to help us with Sand Valley, put in workforce housing 55 plus, right in our Rome Town Center.
Yeah.
So we're doing all of that development on our own, but thank you.
Thank
And
you.
now my next question does go to the hot
Can I,
button.
can I ask that you make it real quick?
Yes, I will, sir. Thank you. This does have to do with green energy. As we know, there's no appetite in your house or mine for green energy. So the question is solar. We do have our zoning, we have our own zoning in Rome, as you know. I do appreciate your question. I wish the county would get out of local zoning. But keep your shoreland, keep your sanitary. But I have my own zoning. I have my own comprehensive planning. I've done everything I can to protect my community as our previous boards, which I was on, to do. The PSC does what they need to do. The DNR does what they need to do. I've spent sleepless nights reading dockets, as has another board member. There's many towns that have done everything, and villages that they can. Not one has been able to keep them out. Not one. Okay? What my question is for you is that the companion bills that were presented in the spring are really about utility credits, if my understanding is correct. I may have the bill number wrong, but I am doing everything I can to protect my community with a joint developers agreement with the #1 solar company in the world with capital investments around the world. I'm not getting into the intervener camp. I've kept silent. They're having a meeting. I welcome you to join us, Scott. You live in our community. It's on November 7th at 6 o'clock. I thank you all of you for your service to the state. Somebody needs to do something at the state level to help communities protect the land that they have. We don't own this land. I don't call it a forest. They were cash crops for a paper industry that we knew that was going down decades ago when they start selling it hand over fist to the next buyer. So now to protect trails, you know what we have to do. I've spoke to your office. Thank you very much, Senator Teston. You've guided me where you could. I understand where you are with this. They're helping me where they could. So, but I ask you, moving forward, do what you need to do in your districts to help your towns and villages do what they can with the PSC and the DNR. Reading these dockets, there's nothing any of us can do.
So there's 6 bills currently that were introduced this week from Senator Coles and Representative Nealon to reform the entirety of the PSC docketing system and the information coming back to communities. So those 6 bills are out there. My community solar bill's been out there a while. Jones' bill on the PSC has been out there for a while. To make any of those changes at the state level, any of those bills had to get passed through the legislature and signed by Governor Evers.
I know, and it's
Governor
not
Evers
going
is
to
not
happen.
going to sign a single bill
It just
reforming
goes back to what I
clean
say.
energy,
There's no
right?
appetite for any of that to happen,
So
and I'm just saying,
So the best thing that I can do is I am going to yell and scream and throw a fit as loud as I can at the PSC to say this is not going to happen in Rome. Am I going to be successful? Probably not.
And it doesn't help me if you do that, Scott.
It doesn't matter if it helps, that's what needs to be done. I mean, I'm not here to try to help an individual perspective. I'm here to help the people in the town who don't want this to happen. And the only thing I can do, besides passing a bill that's not going to get signed, is wait for this decision to come in front of PSC and tell them, absolutely hell no, I don't want this. I don't want to work with a developer who wants to do things that my community doesn't want done. I don't want to work with them, period.
Well, you planted your flag. Well, you're not going to help me if you do that. I just want
I
to make that
understand that, but
publicly known.
I have other concerns I got to
Because
worry
I
about
may
too.
not get a JDA if you do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's the reason we have these forums. That's obviously there are issues, and thank you for your concern, and thank you for your and thank all of you for coming today.
One
we
more.
are
One more.
It's got to be very quick.
It's not a quick one. I don't care. Sorry. I don't care. It was a workforce issue.
They're all like, okay, let's leave.
You got 5 minutes. Yeah.
So I just wonder what your thoughts are, what you're hearing on the state for others for the child care issue. There is no child care. People are waiting on lists for months and months, years for child care. So then you see people staying home, coming out of the workforce. Grandma, grandpa are retiring early, coming out of the workforce to take care of grandkids because we don't have child care. What are you hearing around the state about other solutions? What's coming down the pipeline? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so obviously this has garnered a lot of attention and headlines, even going back when we were debating the state budget. There's no question this is a huge issue. In fact, when the Restaurant Association, excuse me, had their lobby day, I was talking to a couple who own a couple of Culver's franchisees up in the Wausau area, 3 kids paying roughly $33,000 per year in childcare, which blew my mind. Definitely making me rethink about having any kids. And you know, as part of my On the Job series back in May, went and spent a day working at the UWSP Child Care Center, and it gave me a newfound appreciation for what they do. But the problem that we have and the approach that the governor has taken, so using some of the ARPA dollars, $369 million from the Child Care Counts program, well-intentioned, no question about it, like every other industry and business that are facing challenges right now. The problem is that approach, you are throwing a Band-Aid on a broken leg. There is a business model problem within the child care industry. One starts with compensation. When you've got early childhood educators who are starting off making 11, 12, 13 bucks an hour, and that's a problem right there in itself. There's no incentive to go into that profession. So right there, we've already identified a bottleneck. So what can we do to change the business model to help raise the compensation for our early childhood educators? Second, I'm not in the mindset that we just have to completely cut all the regulation out of childcare. We want to make sure that we have safe centers, that we have certainty that when individuals send their kids to these centers that they're qualified, they're safe, they're trained. But I do think there are some things that we can do to lessen some of the restrictions there. When you hear from a lot of our child care centers, when the surveyors come in and they're finding every nook and cranny to slap them on the wrist, but yet we've got all these unregulated daycares that are operating under the radar, that right there is another problem. So, you know, what frustrates me in all this is that this has turned into a political football. So the governor called a special session to have us come in and basically prop up the Child Care Counts program. Here's something that you're not going to hear. The governor is still sitting on roughly over $1 billion in ARPA funds. Over $1 billion in ARPA funds. So he's using this as a political bludgeon, and come to find out, just this week, announced that he's going to spend $170 million in ARPA funds for Child Care Counts. So the governor's had the ability to address this issue since day one. Now, we've all shared our frustration on the fact that we think we should have oversight on these federal dollars, being the legislative branch that has control of the purse strings. We sent roughly 13 bills last session to redirect ARPA money that would be better channeled, and including the mill bill, all of which got vetoed by the governor. So this is one of these instances where politics is being injected into an issue that is a problem that both sides want to tackle. Now, we have a number of bills out there right now that take a different approach to try and deal with the child care issue, but yet we keep falling back on child care counts, child care counts, child care counts, which that's fine, but we're not, again, going to throw a Band-Aid on a broken leg. We need to actually address the root cause that we're facing in the child care industry. One deals with compensation, trying to get more people into this profession, trying to ease up some of the regulatory burdens. That's how we're going to address this issue. And it's unfortunate that this continues to get dragged on, but the governor's had the ability to address this issue since day one, and he's chosen to make it a political issue, which is unfortunate, but we're actually working on a number of different bills right now as we speak in the legislature that are, again, trying to tackle this from multiple different fronts to address the issue and actually try and fix the problem.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank they are always open to discussion, so ask your questions, please. But we do need to thank everyone. And you three have an assignment after you talk to that lady. You are joining the Mid-State team for a short listening session, so hopefully you knew that. But anyway, you are going to that. That is your assignment. Just got a call from the governor that you are going to that. No, I did not.
That would be a surprise.
That would be a surprise.
Calls, that's fine.
Yeah. Let's give our elected officials and all our other elected officials a round of applause. And again, we are sorry we can't cover all of our questions today, but we do need to thank Enbridge, the Marshfield Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Heart of Wisconsin, of course. WFHR, WIRI, thank you for being here. Certainly Mid-State Technical College, and J.H. Findorf and Son. We would not, and this is very sincere, we wouldn't be able to do these without their support. I'd like to thank Wisconsin Rapids Media. Thank you for being here. That will be broadcast throughout both cable channels very soon. I'd like to thank Chatterbox for all their great food. And I'm going to read this just as it is written here. Thanks to Mission Coffee for providing the, quote, much-needed coffee for today, and also thank all of you. Thank you for being here. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks very much.